I wasn't gonna film this video, but I decided to. Today I'm gonna build a slab flattening jig. I have a project coming up that requires me to flatten a walnut cookie. It should be really cool and I'm really looking forward to it. And I wasn't gonna film it because I'm gonna make this thing super fast, super easy, super cheap, out of scrap wood. It's gonna be absolutely nothing special. So the reason I'm bringing you along for this is if I can help anybody think of different ideas on how to build something, or if I can help them save money in any way, then it's worth it. So with all that being said, let's go cut some wood and get to work. All right, so I know I said scrap wood. This isn't exactly scrap wood. It's a full 4x10 sheet of 1/2 inch MDF. To me, it's kind of scrap because I'm really not gonna use it for anything else. I got this when I got the paneling for the shop. It was at the very bottom of the pallet and I got each panel for $4 a piece, which means I got this guy for $4. Now I totally understand you're probably not gonna have a full sheet of MDF laying around your shop, but this is a good example of just finding a right deal. If you're patient enough, keep your eyes out, keep your ears out, deals are out there, you just gotta find them. There's one huge problem with this MDF, and that is when you cut it, it is dusty. It is nasty stuff. Unfortunately, I don't have dust collection set up yet, and also unfortunately, as you can see here, it is snowy and cold outside. So I'm gonna be cutting this in the shop and it's gonna be a disaster. All right, so I'm gonna use this MDF as my straight edge to cut down this MDF. And all I'm gonna do right now is clean up the edges, and then I'm gonna cut 4 10-inch strips. I have to mention right here, right now, I have absolutely no plans. I have an idea in my head. Hopefully we can make it all work. Wish me luck. All right, like I said, that stuff is messy. Huge mess I had to clean up. It's a disaster. I know I had said I was gonna cut 4 10-inch pieces. I ended up cutting them 8 inches thick. I think that'll be a little bit better, and also if I would've went 10-inch, I would've ran out of material. So I got 4 8-inch pieces here and 2 3-inch pieces. Let me explain a little of my plan. My plan for this jig is to actually use this workbench that I'm at here. This workbench is on big casters, so I can wheel this thing outside. So when I'm working on flattening a slab, all that sawdust and everything can just be outside. Unfortunately, I'll have to be a little bit selective on my days because a day like today, I wouldn't be able to do it. So with these 8-inch pieces, I'm going to double them up in kind of a weird way. I'll explain that later. And then I'm just going to simply screw or clamp them to the side of this workbench. I have this big 2x6 on either side. That's plenty strong enough, hopefully plenty straight enough, and I'll just screw or clamp to the side of this. Then these 3-inch pieces are gonna be the top rail that the router sits into. We'll get to these later. For now, let's work on the 8-inch. So the workbench I'm working with is 8 feet long. So first step is to cut these 8-inch pieces down to 8 feet. After these pieces are cut down to length, I am going to rip 2 of them in half for 4 4-inch pieces. This will make much more sense later. Did I mention how much I hate this stuff? Golly, it's so dusty. So here's my plan of attack. I have these clamps set up on the side of the workbench. I'm gonna rest the 8-inch pieces onto those clamps. Then I'm gonna grab one of the 4-inch pieces and line it up with the top of the 8-inch piece. I'll lay down the 4-inch piece, spread a ton of glue all over it, put it up against the 8-inch piece and clamp it down. All right, now that I have this done, I'm gonna work on the second one. I'm gonna breeze through that real quick, and then we'll move on to the next step. Well, I got a lot smarter with the second one and realized all I have to do is glue, line up the top edges, and I'm done. All right, so when all that glue was dry, I took it out of the clamps, I laid it flat, glued another one of those 4-inch strips onto the opposing side of the board, and here we are. I just glued that strip on to the back side of this. So I put it onto the bottom side so that when I lay it down onto my workbench, there's a little bit more meat for the clamp or the screws to grab onto. I probably should have just made this another 8-inch piece so it just doubled up and made it that much stronger, the whole thing. But I think this will be plenty fine. So a few reasons I went this route is one, the main one, is I want it to be totally modular. I want to be able to take the thing off this bench and put it stored anywhere. Maybe up there perhaps. Number 2, I want super easy. What I'd really like is the rails that you just set on the workbench and they just slide, because then you know your level is the same every time. You don't have to adjust anything. It's just easy. So my goal with this was to try to do the same thing. This lip just rests right on the side of my workbench. Then I know my height is the same every time I set it on the bench. Again, just trying to make this as easy as possible. Next, I'm gonna work on the top rail itself. So to be honest, figuring out the design for the top rail has been a little bit more of a challenge for me. Not that it's hard, I'm just trying to come up with the best solution that is also the strongest solution, especially since I'm using MDF. So what I think I'm gonna do is take these two 3-inch pieces and glue them together and double them up, make them nice and strong. So let's throw some glue on these, get these glued and clamped, and we'll be back tomorrow. This is that Gorilla wood glue. I'll be honest, I don't like this stuff at all. Hence the reason I'm using it on this. It was given to me, so this is a perfect project just to more or less waste it, but still be able to use it. I'm gonna bring over the big top rails and attach them to the workbench. All right, well, this plan is coming together quite nicely. I'm pretty happy with the way this is turning out. So my plan now is to just figure out the distance for these top rails. So there's 2 steps here that I need to figure out. I need to figure out, obviously, the space between these bottom rails for the top rails. The second thing I need to figure out is the spacing for the actual router itself. And for that, I think I have a clever idea. I have this little router table here. This little router table has an attachment that bolts to the table that also bolts to the router. Well, it's a big flat square piece of metal, and I think it'll work as the actual sled itself that moves back and forth on the top rails. Let me tear this apart and we'll see if it works. And there's that plate I was talking about. I think this is gonna work perfect. So if I set this between the rails on some kind of a flat piece, then I can move that back and forth. Now I'm also thinking that flat piece could be my edge that goes up against the bottom rail that allows it to not slide off. I'll lose about 1/2 inch of depth, but I'm at 3.5, 4 inches here. I don't foresee myself working with a slab that's any bigger than that. All right, so the next step here is to cut the bottom piece for the router itself to slide on. All right, well, I ran out of a big enough piece of MDF, so I had to resort to this piece of pine. This was left in the shop. I don't know, it should work just fine. All right, so I'm kind of having a problem here, and that is that my handles are gonna get in the way. But I'd like to be able to use this in other applications other than just this sled. So what I think I'm gonna do is take this plate off and see if I can turn the plate, put it back on, and maybe the handles will be side to side. All right, so I have one other problem I'm gonna address real quick. These screw holes aren't countersunk, so the screws themselves stick out quite a bit. Well, that's not gonna work with my sled here. So I'm gonna grab my countersink bit, run it on these real quick, and hopefully get these screws to lay in flat. It's my work. All right, we have one other problem. There's this little nub that sticks out. It's probably for the router table, so I gotta cut that off. Lucky for me, I got this fancy tool wall. Perfect. Actually slides pretty well too. Okay, I think what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna cut down this bottom plate. I'm gonna get it down to about 1/8 or maybe 1/4 narrower or shorter than what this distance between the bottom rails is. That way there's a little bit of play, but not too much. It'll kind of hold the whole sled into place side to side, but hopefully it won't be so tight that it grabs anywhere. I want a little bit of play with it. So let's grab that measurement. We'll cut it down. 48.5. Let's go 48.25, so we have 1/8 inch on each side. All right, with this cut, I'm gonna clean up one end first, flip it over, and cut it down to size. By the way, if you haven't seen the video of me building this miter saw station, I'll leave a link down below. It's got some pretty cool features and it's been working super well for me. Go check it out. All right, let's see if this guy's gonna work. Perfect. All right, next step, I need to figure out how long I want these top rails. I want these to overhang a little bit because obviously they're what's holding everything to the bottom rails, but I don't want them to stick out so much that they're hitting me or getting in my way. I want a little overhang just for strength and wiggle room. We're 50.5, maybe 1/2 inch overhang on each side, so 51.5. Yeah, can always cut it down later. Back to the miter saw. Perfect. So if this is under here, then the whole thing can't shift and it's forced to slide. I know this is a pretty ghetto setup and I am totally just winging it here. So far, my ideas are working. And trust me, I've seen plenty of these online. I've gotten ideas over the years, but it's cool just to throw stuff together and have fun doing it. Next, before I attach everything, I need to cut a slot in the bottom plate here. That way the router obviously can go through it and it can do its job. All right, so to do that, I'm gonna grab the biggest Forstner bit that I have. I'm gonna figure out the spacing between the end of the bottom sled and the side rails so that the router can make a full length pass. That's where I'll drill the hole with the Forstner bit. I'll make some lines between the holes, cut it out with the jigsaw, and we should have a perfectly good bottom plate for this sled. Well, I didn't end up having that big of a Forstner bit, so I had to change it a little bit and just square it off. Still works good, looks good. I think it'll work. All right, next step is I'm going to put all this together. Before I do that, I'm gonna run these two pieces over the joiner, get a nice flat edge, start gluing and nailing. All right, now that we got this glued and nailed, let's see if it's gonna work. Oh yeah, that's gonna work. But the real test, the moment of truth, does the router fit and slide? Like a glove. That's cool. All right, the only issue, like I said earlier, is moving it side to side. I imagine when this is running and I'm trying to move it, it'll be a little different. I don't think it'll be that bad. Let's see how flat it is from side to side. It's probably hard to see on camera, but I think it's perfect. All right, that looks super good, and I'm thrilled with the way this is turning out. The only thing I'm thinking about doing next is adding bracing right here. So let's add a little bit of bracing on the ends, and then this thing's almost done. And it's pretty cool. I'm pretty thrilled with it. So lucky for me, I have some offcuts from these top rails here. That'll work perfect to go right there. All right, I got this piece cut, and I also ran this through the joiner just to get some nice clean flat surfaces. So I'm gonna go ahead and glue and nail this guy into place, and I think that's the final step. So the only other thing I need to add to this flattening jig is paste wax. I'm gonna put paste wax all over this bottom piece and all over these bottom rails. Unfortunately, I don't have any paste wax. It's on its way. Well, look what just showed up, some wood butter. So now we can throw this on this sled and see what kind of a difference it makes. Oh yeah. What a huge difference that makes. Not to mention it smells amazing. I found this on Amazon. It's called Wood Butter, the Bearded Chef. It's pretty cool. It's 100% made in the USA and it's veteran owned. Not a plug by any means, but it's cool stuff. Smells really good, works really good. Just for the fun of it, I'll leave a link in the description below. Now I wish I could tell you I had a slab that I could flatten right now, but I don't. I have a project coming up that I will be flattening a walnut cookie, but I don't have it here yet. Also on its way. I'm very excited to use this on that cookie and see how it works. I have a feeling this is gonna be great. The best part about it, the way I see it, this thing only cost me about $5. The sheet of MDF was $4. This was free or really expensive because it came with the house. Either way you wanna look at it. And the glue and nails, I don't know, maybe $1. So let's call this the $5 flattening jig. So this will be a fairly anticlimactic ending to a video. I know this wasn't a great project, but I'm super thrilled about this. I'm thrilled to have it, and I'm even more thrilled that it cost me about $5. Unfortunately, there's no glorified ending to this. There's no beauty shots, nothing. Just a cheap slab flattening jig. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.